When you hear the word dysfunction, what comes to mind? Abnormal, maybe a little crazy, unusual, way out there. When you put the words dysfunction and family together, what comes to mind? Maybe an unhealthy family, a family that is out of bounds, a family that does weird things, weird customs, bad lifestyle. If you look in the Bible, there are many, many examples of dysfunctional families. Why does God show us all the dysfunctional families in the Bible? Because every family has at least a little bit of dysfunction in it. Some family has a lot of dysfunction. Some family has very little. I believe that the more Christ is in your family, it reduces drastically the amount of dysfunction in your family. If Christ is not in your family, the dysfunction is enormous. Maybe it could be a father who was drinking and that caused dysfunction, or a mother that was on drugs and that was dysfunction, or maybe it was a parent that was jealous and that jealous nature was passed on to the kids, or maybe it was a envious nature or covetous nature, wanting what your neighbor had, and that insecurity was passed on. Or maybe it was favoritism. You were raised in a family that had favoritism, and now you find yourself playing favorites with your children. The point that God shows us in the Bible, all these dysfunctional families, is that he shows us that it doesn't have to be that way. And he shows us what are the consequences if dysfunction is passed on from generation to generation. It just wreaks havoc in that family line. But he shows us also that it can stop through a relationship with Jesus Christ. In our lesson today, we're going to look at a dysfunctional family, a large family that's dysfunctional. And then we're going to, over the period of weeks, we're going to trace and see how that dysfunction manifests itself within that family, and how, in the end, it can stop and not be passed on. Thank you very much. Stay tuned for this week's lesson. Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. John W. Wilson III. I am bringing you the Sunday School lesson for Sunday, September 6th. The lesson is titled Biased Love. It will come out of Genesis 37, verses 2 through 11. Then we'll skip to verse 23 to 24a, and then we'll move on to verse 28. Before we get started in this fantastic lesson, this very practical lesson, it's a very difficult story. I want to remind you to hit the share button, hit the like button, and if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. I want this to reach as many people as possible, but I need your help. I need your help. So let's get into our lesson, Biased Love, Genesis 37. I want to give you a little backdrop of what's going on. Genesis 37 is the story of Joseph, and it tells us how he gets into enslaved. But a lot of times we look at the story, chapter 37, and we don't understand maybe what led up to this. And my theory or my philosophy on Joseph and his brothers, how bad they treated him, they were wrong, but I think they had help from their father that set up and caused all this to happen. And they did not handle their adversity or adverse situation that well, which led them into doing terrible, horrible, sinful things. So let's look at the whole story and let's see what it says. Well, let's start with Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah had difficulty having children. And then later on in life, they lose a little bit of their faith. They lose their trust in God. Sarah gets a maidservant, Hagar, for Abraham, allows them to hook up, They have a baby. Abraham knew what God said, but he did it anyway. So Sarah and Abraham are both at fault. Hagar has a baby son named Ishmael. For the next 10 years or so, everything is going well. And then all of a sudden, Sarah becomes pregnant as God promised. She is 90. He is 100. Isaac is born. All of a sudden, now you have a son from another mother. And then you have another son from another mother who's the wife of Abraham. And you can't have two women in the same household. And it's sometimes having half brothers can cause conflict. And that's what it caused, conflict, on Sarah's part especially. She felt no need for Ishmael, no need for Hagar. She gets Abraham to kick him out of the house. And he does reluctantly. And that's the dysfunction. That's what dysfunction does. He disobeyed God, went outside the bounds of his will, brought something that wasn't of God, an act. I'm not saying Israel wasn't, but an act that wasn't of God into the house, and then you have dysfunction. And so now you have Isaac's lineage, and then you have Ishmael's lineage at conflict, even until today. Isaac represents the Jewish race. Ishmael represents the Middle Eastern countries, in that country, and then they're constantly at war with Isaac. Just dysfunction. So then you have Isaac. He's going to get married to Rebekah. Rebekah and Isaac have two boys, twins, Jacob, and they have Esau. Esau and Jacob may have had some rivalry even coming out the womb because Jacob was grabbing the heel of Esau as he came out. So, but what happened was, as the family developed, Rebekah began to have favor with Jacob, and then Isaac began to have favor with Esau. In other words, each parent had their own favorite. And it caused problems in the family. It didn't make for a close relationship between Esau and Isaac. Esau was a man of the outdoors, which Isaac liked. Jacob was a homebody, a homeboy that clung to his mother, and that's what Rebekah liked. And so Rebekah and Jacob schemed together and weaseled out or conned or cheated Esau out of his birthright. And when that happened, the relationship was destroyed. I could imagine that Isaac and Rebekah had serious problems, and I could imagine the dislike that Esau had for Jacob. In fact, Rebekah had Isaac leave the household in fear of his life. That was the ultimate disrespect. And the bad thing about it, how dysfunction works when you bring something, an ungodly act or selfish motives or jealousy or favoritism in the family, it goes against God's will. When Jacob left out that household, that was the last time his mother Rebekah saw him. She died, never seeing him again. Terrible thing. And so now Jacob has to live in fear for the rest of his life, to think that Esau is going to retaliate against him. So dysfunction, favoritism has plagued the family for a long time. We don't talk about it much, but if you were to ask people, or maybe look in your family, or even look at my family, my extended family, you will see favoritism. And favoritism, if not handled right, it can cause a lot of dysfunction, hurt feelings, drama, pain, bitterness within that family. And so that's what we're going to see with Joseph. So here we have Jacob is estranged from Esau, estranged from Isaac. His mother dies later on without seeing him, without him seeing her. And then now he goes to Rebekah's brother, his uncle, Laban. So he gets conned, he gets tricked. So he has to work 14 years in order for him to marry his one and only bride, not his one and only, but his favorite bride, Rachel. But he had got conned into marriage 14 years earlier into marrying her sister, Leah. So with Leah, he ends up, through the course of the relationship, they have 6 sons together. And then Rachel struggled to have children. And so since she struggled, she got a maidservant. Her maidservant, the Bible tells us, was Bilhah. Bilhah had 2 sons for Jacob. There was a period where Leah could not have any more children or had a delay in children. And she went and did the same thing. And she got a maidservant named Zilpah. And Zilpah had 2 sons for Jacob. And so then Leah ended up having more sons. So she had a total of 6 sons, 6 sons, 1 daughter. And then Rachel, at the very end, was able to have 2 sons of her own. One was Joseph, and the other one was Benjamin. And when she had Benjamin, she died in childbirth. So now look at the dynamic, what's going on. You have 6 sons and 1 daughter by Leah. You have 2 sons by 1 maidservant, another 2 sons by 1 maidservant, and then 2 other sons by Rachel. In other words, Jacob has 4 women who he's had children with. 4. Now that creates dysfunction. Now the issue is Jacob plays favorite. Rachel was his favorite. The children of Rachel, they were his favorite. He spent time with Rachel. He did not spend the same amount of time he did with the other women because Rachel was his favorite. And Leah tried her best to woo him, to get Jacob to love her, but he just never did because he loved Rachel that much more. So Leah had tons of heartache. Why won't he love me? Why won't he give me the time? The maidservants, they're treating their children like stepchildren, not spending time with them, and it's all chaos. Man was not designed to please more than one woman. And so it just caused a lot of problem, a lot of conflict. And not only was there conflict with the women that had the children, the mothers, there had to be conflict within the children. They had to notice as they were growing up, why does Jacob spend time with Joseph and Benjamin and not me? Why do they get everything that they want and I don't get what they want? Why does he treat their mother better than they treat my mother? So you have as they're growing up, they can see the difference. And if it's not handled right, there's a lot of resentment going on. So that's going to lead us into our story here. You have a complex family. You have 4 women who have born 12 sons and 1 daughter. And you get 1 husband who's trying to please all of them but can't because he has favorites. And that favorite has caused a lot of animosity and tension between the family, competing for attention, doing this and doing that, not getting an attention, feeling guilty, feeling like something I must have done. And so a lot of resentment is growing right now. So that's where we're at right now. Verse 2 tells us these are the generations of Jacob. Now we have Joseph is 17 years old. He's the second youngest son. The other sons are much older than he is. And he was pasturing the flock with his brothers. Okay? He was a boy with the sons. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. Okay? His father's wives. I told you who they were. They were one was a maidservant of Rachel. The other one was a maidservant of Leah. Okay? And it says here, and Joseph brought a bad report to them, to their father. Now this is the problem, okay? During that 17 years of Joseph growing up, he got special treatment. He wore the best clothes. He ate the best food, slept in the best house, spent time with his father. His father did everything for him. His father loved him. In fact, he loved him so much, it was obvious to everybody. So he was spoiled. He was a brat. He maybe felt privileged. He was a little naive. He probably didn't see it the way the other one saw it, didn't see the difference. He just felt it was normal. But anyway, here we tells us how Jacob makes it different with Joseph. Joseph is the youngest, but yet he's sent to oversee or report on or spy on his other brothers to see if they're doing their job. And in this case here, he brings back a bad report. In today's time, you would call him a fink, you call him a rat, or if you were in that drug scene, you call him a narc. He is a tattletale. And so Jacob has put him in that position. He doesn't really pasture the flock. He just makes sure that his other brothers are doing that when he's the youngest right before Benjamin. And so when you create family members tallying on one another, there's going to be animosity. There's going to be pain. There's going to be resentment. And Jacob is setting this up because of his favoritism. Joseph should have been out there in the field working with his brothers on equal ground, but yet he is set above his brothers, although he is younger than his brothers, and that was something that just did not go well. So here we have here now, it says now Israel. Israel is another name for Jacob. Remember when Jacob was wrestling with the angel of the Lord, and the angel of the Lord touched his hip, dislocated it, and gave him a new name, gave him the name of Israel. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his sons. They can say that because it was obvious. He loved him more than any of his sons. That means he got everything. He was spoiled. He didn't have to pay for his lunch. Other kids had to pay for the lunch when they went to school. He got the shiny new car. They got a car that was used and old and beat up, if they got a car at all. He wore the best clothes. He got the money, had money in his pocket. He one that looked sharp all the time. They had nothing. They lived in poverty probably, while he lived in some kind of wealth. And so, but he loved them. Favoritism. And this love is not necessarily used in a good way. It's favoritism. It says because he was a son of his own age. He had been waiting a long time to have a son from Rachel. A long time. So he was a son in his own age. He had him when he was an old man. So he loved him to death. He says, and he made him a robe of many colors. Second mistake. A robe of many colors. What does it mean to have a robe of many colors? Doesn't say he made a robe of colors for his other sons. He did not. That robe of colors set as a distinction from his other brothers. In other words, Joseph was set apart from his other brothers. He was raised above. He was deemed as superior. In other words, he was not a shepherd boy like his other brothers. His other brothers were shepherds. They worked in the field. By him having that coat of many colors means that he worked in the house. He didn't do dirty work. He did the management. He didn't do all the tussling with the sheep and the goat. He was above that. And so this robe of many colors, many say it wasn't just a short coat, it was a full-length coat, very expensive, very flamboyant, and sent a direct message to his other brothers that Joseph loved him more than he loved them. It sent a message that Joseph was set apart or set above them, and they were set below Joseph. Meaning that Joseph, he was really happy when Joseph was born. Really happy. He was thrilled. Joseph was all that he asked for, and they were not. So by doing that, it sent a wrong message to the other brothers. See, and Jacob is starting, and he's the instigator of this. And you would think that he would have learned from what he came out of. He came out of a situation of favoritism, and he should have remembered how that affected his family. But sometimes when we have dysfunction in our family, we can think that is normal. We can think that is common. In reality, that is not. Maybe Jacob thought what he went through was normal and he passed it on. But sometimes, like we learned in the Epistle of James, we have to do self-examination, or we have to listen to others when they can see things that are going wrong and we cannot. And Jacob, whether somebody told him, I'm sure Rachel or the other Leah or somebody told him that, why do you make a difference with this son Joseph and you make a difference against my sons? I'm sure he heard all that, but he had to ignore it. So he's the instigator. He is causing this dysfunction. That's why I said in the beginning that you look at the sons as the bad guys, and they did bad things. But look who the instigator was. Look who created the situation. If he would have treated them equal, it wouldn't have been the conflict here. It would have been a nice, close-knit family, a bunch of boys and one daughter. So here he says, robe of many colors, flamboyant, set them apart, special attention, all those things there. But when his brothers saw that his father loved him, special treatment, that nice coat, more than all his other brothers, they hated him and could not speak to him peacefully. Joseph hasn't done a thing. He's a recipient of it, but he hasn't done anything. Jacob, by him making a difference, has caused his other sons to hate Joseph and not to speak peacefully to them. Now, you can say, well, Jacob is not all to blame. He's not. The issue is that he's created a situation, and these other sons, his other 10, did not handle it well. When we find ourselves in a situation where someone is getting preferential treatment, maybe it's on a job, maybe it's in your family, or maybe it's in some type of other relationship, we are not to allow hatred and bitterness to take over us. When hatred and bitterness takes over us, we do things and say things that we should not say. And we allow that temptation or that test to cause us to sin. Instead of us relying on God and giving that situation to God and letting him replace that father who is not good, who is mistreating us, who's putting one family over another family, we now to give it to God and let him handle it instead of trying to handle it ourselves. And when we try to handle ourselves, that's when bitterness and resentment comes into play. And this is what it is. They allow their emotions to take over, and it has caused them to sin. How do we know that? Because it caused hate in their heart, and they could not speak peacefully to them. In other words, they didn't handle the situation correctly. It caused them to sin. And so if you and I are in that position where we see favoritism and it's against us, we cannot allow hate to come in. We cannot mistreat that person. We have to give it to God and let God heal our hurts. They did not do that. So you have Jacob and the brothers creating a horrific situation. I hold ultimately Jacob the responsible party, because it is so obvious he is doing this. It is a lot to ask somebody to handle, but they should have. Verse 5 says, now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, hear this dream that I have dreamed. Now, the problem here, you have Joseph, he's a youngster, 17 years old enough to work in the field, and not working in the field. He's set apart. He's working in a clean environment, overseeing them, reporting on what they're doing. He's managing them, and he's a young guy. Now he comes up with a dream. And so the problem with Joseph here is that he's naive. He's braggadocious. He's just going to say what's on his mind. He doesn't see the resentment that's stewing up in his brother's heart, how much they hate him, how much they don't like him, and yet he has to babble his mouth and tell the world every time something good happens to him. And we have to learn that just because God gives you something or God blesses you with something, that doesn't mean you have to tell somebody or tell somebody that you think that you ought to know that doesn't want to hear it. Sometimes God does things for you or blesses you with something or gives you a vision or gives you a dream just for you to hold on to. Doesn't mean for you to tell somebody else, because somebody else cannot handle it. And since they cannot handle it, they might cause retaliation toward you. So be careful when God blesses you or when God gives you a dream. You need to understand whether or not God wants you to share it with somebody or not, or which person it's okay to tell and which person is not okay to tell. Because just because you're happy doesn't mean that they're going to be happy for you. They may smile in your face, they may grin in your face, but they may have resentment in their heart. So he says here, I've dreamed, behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. What is he saying? He's saying that I dreamed that one day I'm going to rise up above you, and I'm going to stand up above you, and you're going to bow down to me. That's what he said. Now, he's 17. Common sense tells you that's not a dream that you tell the person that they're going to bow down to you. Just that's common sense tells you that. But he's naive. He's braggadocious. He's a little prideful. Might be a little arrogant. Feels a little bit of privilege. Tells his brothers. Causes more conflict. Heightens the unforgiveness. Heightens the hate. Heightens the bitterness. Because he's talking too much. Talking too much. Look what his brothers do. His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us?" They understood exactly what he said. Maybe Joseph didn't realize how painful what he said to his brothers. Maybe Joseph was looking at it from his point of view. I'm going to be reign. I'm going to be king, and you're going to bow down to me. And he was happy for what he got out to deal, but didn't understand how they felt and what they're going to get out to deal. He says, or are you indeed to rule over us? It says, so they hated him even more for his dreams and his words. They hated him because Jacob loved him more than he loved them. Then they hated Joseph because of the coat that Jacob gave Joseph of many colors, which was evidence of that love. Now they hate him even more. It's escalating because of his dreams. It's the dreams that set off these brothers. It's the dreams that caused them to do what they're going to do. Not the coat, not the fact that maybe Jacob loved them more, but the fact that he loved them more and that and this dream that he had made them really, really hate Joseph. So we got to be careful about what comes out of our mouth because not everybody's going to be happy. I said that before. I just want to reiterate it. Then if it wasn't enough, you think Joseph would have learned by the response he got from his brothers. He tells his brothers another dream, but this time he tells it with his father Jacob present. He says, then he had another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun and the moon, that's the mother, father, and 11 stars, that's the 11 brothers. Now he's including Benjamin, who must have been born into the situation, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Look what he says right here. And he should have known that's going to cause resentment, but he's naive and maybe feels a little privileged. He's spoiled. He's not sensitive to other people's feelings. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father Jacob rebuked him and said to him, his father didn't like what he said. His father corrected him verbally. Father didn't hate him, but he corrected him verbally. What is this dream that you dreamed? Shall I and your mother, his mother's dead now, but it might be talking about Leah, stepmother, and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? I mean, what he said was unheard of. Usually, it wasn't the younger that ruled over the rest. It was usually Reuben who would have been next in line. He would have been ruling over the brothers. And then if that wasn't the case, then Jacob, since he's still alive, he would still be ruling over everybody. So what Joseph said was a complete oxymoron. And I can understand how they got upset because it was a complete reversal of what the customs and traditions were of that day. In other words, it was something that Joseph should have kept to himself. Except to himself. But he did not. So here we have this. Look what happened. And his brothers were jealous of him. They were jealous. And his father kept the saying in mind. Maybe his father felt somehow sensed it was a prophetic from God. And just kept it in the back. He didn't like it. But he kept it in the back of his mind. But his brothers were jealous of him. You can tell right now, they don't like him at all. They despise him. Not only do my father love you more. Not only do you wear the nicer clothes. Not only you don't have to work the way we work. Now you're dreaming and said you're going to rule over us. And that's enough. That's enough. I'm going to go to 12, just kind of paraphrase a little bit and get us to 23. And so what we have here is that Joseph is sent out by Jacob to look for his brothers to give a report, which is another mistake. Just another mistake. And so you don't have the younger ones telling the older ones what to do. And so the brothers see him from afar. They see him coming. And the Bible says in verse 18, they conspire to kill him. Their hatred is rising to the level of murder. And they said one to another, here comes the dreamers, those dreams that penetrated their hearts. Come on now, let us kill him and throw him to one of the pits. They wanted to kill him, put him in a pit, and he'd be done with it. They go back and they tell their father Jacob that an animal killed him, devoured him, and we don't know what happened to him, and that will put an end to all of his dreams. But when Reuben heard this, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let's not take his life. And Reuben said, shed no blood, throw him in the pit here in the wilderness. Do not lay a hand on him. So he's supposed to stay in the pit till they decided what they wanted to do. And Reuben, the oldest, did not want to have to face his father and say that Joseph was killed and this happened to him. He wanted to have some type of relationship with him. And plus, Reuben had slept with one of his wives, and that causes problems too. And so he wanted to be back in grace with his father Jacob. But if Joseph was dead, that would ruin it forever. So here we go right here. It says, do not lay a hand on that he might be rescued out of the hand and restored to his father. So he didn't want to kill him. He just kind of wanted to punish him. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, took that thing off, the robe of many colors that he wore all the time, throwing it in their face. They took him and threw him in the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. In other words, they were going to let him die in that pit out of thirst. It probably was a hot day. He was going to die. And when they sat down to eat, they saw a caravan. Now, Reuben's not here. He had gone somewhere. They see a caravan coming from Gilead. And they are traders. And so what they do, they sell Joseph to these traders, these Midianites and these Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And these Midianites take him to Egypt. And then Reuben returns to the pit, saw that he was not there, tore his clothes, returned to his brother and said, the boy is gone. It said, where shall I go? He knows that's going to be a big disappointment to his father. And he's going to be held responsible. And so that's the story we got here. Okay. What do we learn from this? I think what we learn, or what I learned from it, is this. You have to somehow self-examine your family. Every family has some dysfunction in it. There's no perfect family. The more the family is Christ-like, the less the dysfunction. The more Christ is not there, the more the dysfunction. If we're not careful, we don't have our eyes open, if we're not tuned to what's going on in our families, if we don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, a strong one, we begin to repeat the dysfunctions in our family. My father drank, so I'm going to drink. My mother did drugs, so I'm going to do drugs. My mother had a child at 16, I'm going to have a child at 16. My father had multiple women with multiple kids, I'm going to do the same thing. My father stayed out late at night, I'm going to stay out late at night. My father drank at an early age, I'm going to drink at an early age. My father and mother smoked, I'm going to smoke. My father used to take me to clubs, I'm going to go to clubs. Dysfunctions. My mother and father, they each had their favorites in the family. When I have my family, I'm going to have my favorites because I wasn't one of them. When my father whipped me with a switch, a sticker switch, I'm going to whip my kids with a sticker switch. My father used to beat me down, I'm going to beat my children down. A lot of things we got to care about the dysfunction. My father didn't go to church, so guess what? I'm not going to go to church. My father didn't do it. He was passive in the family. My mother was strong. So now I'm going to marry me a passive husband, and I'm going to be strong in the family because I don't have confidence in men. A lot of dysfunction. But here we have the dysfunction of favoritism that's being passed on in generation to generation. And I'm here to say that it can stop. It can stop. It doesn't have to be passed on. It does not. If we look at the end of the story, we fast forward, we see Joseph at the end. He could have had hate and bitterness. That hate and bitterness that his brothers had, it could have rubbed off on them. And he chose to put an end to it right there and forgive them. So what am I saying? If you're a victim of favoritism, if you're a victim of dysfunction, guess what? Forgive and don't pass it on. Forgive and let it go. Forgive and give it completely to God. Don't try to handle it yourself. Don't let that hate and bitterness build up when you have resentment. because that resentment will come out. The thing about dysfunction is, and I said it earlier, is that we think that it's normal. We think that it's normal. We can't see it. I remember I was in a training one time, and this lady said that the people who are arrogant, the problem with them is that they don't know they're arrogant. And so when we have our dysfunction, wherever our dysfunction is, we are the last person, usually, to know what our dysfunction is. We need a good friend, a good sibling, and maybe a parent, maybe even a child to help us understand if we have some dysfunctions that are way out of hand that we're no longer controlling. So what we learn from here, if you don't control your forgiveness, your ability to forgive, it will eat you alive. It will cause you to sin. If you don't deal with your dysfunction, you will pass it on, and you'll pass on resentment and hate and jealousy to the next generation. But my argument today is that you can put an end to it. It can stop. It does not have to be passed on. Well, I hope that this lesson has been beneficial to you. We're just in the beginning of studying about Joseph. We're going to learn so much about him. We're going to learn that how in the beginning at 17, he was prideful, he was arrogant, he was innocent. But we're going to see how he through adversity, to really no fault of his own, how that adversity shaped him and groomed him and made him Christ-like, and have the ability to forgive even those who put him in slavery. Maybe that's a lesson that in our society today, maybe we need more forgiveness. Maybe the left need to forgive more. Maybe the right need to forgive more. Maybe there needs to be more forgiveness instead of more hate and discord. I think that's the answer. Anyway, God bless you. I love you much. Have a great Sunday, and I will see you next week. I have enjoyed this lesson. Thank you for being with me. May God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.